Hi, everybody. Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation for the Land of Israel Network. Still a little bit hoarse, but getting better. I'm taping this show on a beautiful day in Jerusalem at a park in the middle of the city. It's March 22nd, 2018, the 6th day of Nisan, 5778. But when you're hearing this, it's only going to be airing on March 25th. Hey, guys, it's like just a few days before Passover. I got to get my show out when I can. But I am with one of my oldest and dearest friends, Yisrael Medad, who we affectionately called Winkie. Since he's much, much older than I am, and of course is getting older than I am all the time, he's been in the trenches of Israel advocacy and Jewish activism for a long, long time. Those of you who've been listening to my show for years have heard me interview him before. So I'm delighted. There were all these things that I wanted to talk about with somebody today, and I thought, Winkie, and then we'll make a show out of it. So first of all, thank you so much for agreeing to share this fluffy piece of mic with me today.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be on the air.
All right, so a couple of things. You were just at the Anti-Semitism Forum the last couple of days. I wasn't able to make it. Again, you have a wife at home. I don't. Just saying. So, and you posted something very interesting about a little run-in you had with someone from the foreign ministry there. So what was going on? Give us a little background.
Well, first of all, the conference itself, I think it's called the Global Forum for Combating Anti-Semitism. And it's held every, I think, 3 years now by the foreign ministry in conjunction, of course, with other bodies. And I go to it not only because of the good food and the good company, but because it is less top-heavy than usually those who have gone to Jewish establishment events. It's much too top-heavy. These have a lot of other people that come in, including people just off the street and other interesting people. So I went to it.
So is there anti-Semitism in the world? Quick, cut to the chase. What was the answer? I'm sitting here and very tense.
It will never go away. There is a Jew, there is an anti-Semite. It's one of these arithmetical equations that make up life, unfortunately. There were a few things that got me a little bit riled at the beginning, and I'll just say too many of the panels, at least those that I attended, and I looked at some of the others, were not balanced enough. We have a foreign ministry that is headed by a Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, with a deputy minister, a Mrs. Tzipi Chotovely, who was slightly right of center. And too many of them did not have enough right of center expressions and voices. And I can give you just one example. The one on intersectionality on college campuses, the only guy who really spoke up strongly for Israel, I'm not saying that no one spoke against Israel, but strongly for Israel, was a Roman Catholic Iranian from Commentary magazine. Right. So that's an example.
Wait, so let me ask you something. This is a conference on anti-Semitism. So with this comes the anti-Israel sentiment on campus, because intersectionality, right, is that every group that somehow sees himself as a victim, right, or a minority group, if it's women, if it's blacks, if it's gays, whatever, has to intersect with hatred of Judaism, Israel, both. I mean, I feel, and I know you do as well, that anti-Zionism or hatred of Israel is politically correct anti-Semitism today. But did the conference come from that understanding, or it brought it in separately? Well,
it started off that way. In the sense of, it's like, I call it reverse intersectionality. We always used to make jokes. Jews like to make jokes about Jew hatred and everything. And so, why do you hate me? You hate me because I'm a communist, because I'm a capitalist, because I'm because I'm over-religious. I'm not religious. I'm trying to assimilate. I'm trying to be a ghetto Jew. And it goes back and forth. We can never satisfy the anti-Semites. So in that sense, it's sort of like, I call it reverse intersectionality, which says that all oppressed minorities have to work together because everyone is oppressed in some way, and that affects everybody else except the Jew. Mm-hmm. Okay, the Jew is a minority. Not all Jews are rich. I can tell you from my personal experience. Okay, not all Jews are communists, and not all Jews are Bundists, and not all Jews are right-wing fanatics and stuff like that. But we get hated for no matter what we do, because we are. And in this sense, who we are, you and I, and about at least 8 million other, close to 8 million other Jews who live in Israel and many others who identify with Zionism say to be a Jew also means to be a nationalist Jew or a national identity Jew who has a right to live in historic homeland with his heritage and his culture and his religion and everything else that's going on. And now anti-Semitism has, in a certain sense, morphed into anti-Zionism to be cleansed. Because you're oppressing the Palestinians, we can now hate you, not because you're a Zionist, not because you want to live separately, because you're oppressing the Palestinians, as if the Palestinians, for many years, about a century or so, haven't been oppressing us. Right. So that was the raison d'etre of the session. You asked me specifically about my run-in. I had a run-in with the Deputy Permanent Representative of Israel at the United Nations. It started off when someone else was detailing the Palestinian Authority attempt to steal, okay, I call it identity theft, of major Jewish historical, geographical locations or institutions. So we can start from the Temple Mount to the Western Wall to Rachel's tomb to the Cave of the Patriarchs, and he was pointing out how every year or 2 years they started a new one. Batir, remember the Batir, which... Okay, and he was explaining, it was just...
I'll just explain to my listeners. Batir, I consider the height of chutzpah, which can't really be translated. I hope you know what it means. Unmitigated gall is maybe the closest. Batir is ancient Beitar. It's where in the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 2nd century, they had their last stand. And it is an unbelievably well-preserved site of that last battle of Beitar. Roman ballista balls, arrowhead, the whole business. The Arabs who now live in Batir, because of course they killed or threw out the Jews that lived there, have now claimed their beautiful terraces, ancient terraces from the Second Temple period near Batir. And they have gone, I believe, to the UN and to UNESCO because Israel is planning a road or something along there. And they're saying that Israel is destroying their ancient terracing, which happens to be our ancient terracing, and that area, they're also dismantling all that historical record of 2,000 years ago. So that's Batir for those of you who haven't heard me talk about this yet. Okay, sorry, Wink, go ahead.
And in his words, he mentioned that all UNESCO documents and other related documents never really call, at least until they were called down on it finally within the last year, the Western Wall. The Western Wall, they always call it El Burak, on the name of the mythical steed, the flying horse of Muhammad, who got him from Saudi Arabia, supposedly, to Jerusalem after stopping off at Sinai, but that's another story altogether. Here I saw an opportunity, an opening, and I mentioned that I had been blogging about this at least since 2007, okay, but before that I had written articles and mentioned it, that Yasser Arafat, immediately upon his return in '93, after the Oslo Accords, always referred to the Western Wall as Al-Burak. And I said he's doing it purposely, not only to instill the name or the impression of El-Burak, but because there was in 1930 an international commission that the British Mandate had set up that told the Jews they don't own the wall, they don't own the pavement in front of the wall, it all belongs to the Waqf, which is the Islamic Trust, which supervises the Temple Mount. What they do have is the right to certain customs, which include praying, etc., 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 but not hanging up lanterns, not putting up a prayer partition between the sexes, and definitely not blowing the shofar at the end of Yom Kippur or even on Rosh Hashanah. I won't go into the history of that, but I jumped up and I said, I and other people have been pointing this out, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is supposed to be working in the United Nations, has never pushed back in this, at least since 2007 that I know, probably earlier. And therefore, in my opinion, you have failed because look at this gentleman. He's complaining about the result of what you didn't do, because you never called it the Western Wall. You didn't call it the Temple Mount. You sort of fidged and fudged on this. The answer was, and it's on Facebook recorded with a video, is that A, oh, sir, you remind me of someone who decided that the best way to get out of the Arab-Israel conflict is to call the territories, not the West Bank, but Judea and Samaria.
Oh, no.
And he said that, can I say it, in a sneering fashion. And then he added, I would suggest to you, sir, that you do not attack those who are trying to defend Israel, but those who are harming Israel. All right? Okay, you and I know that, in my opinion, and probably yours, he is the one, not directly and not probably even consciously, which is even worse, is harming the state of Israel's position by not pushing back. At least I'm not asking him to bomb Ramallah. I'm not asking him to assassinate Mahmoud Abbas. I'm asking him to say, El Burak, sir, is not El Burak. It's the Western Wall. If it was El Burak, it was only from maybe the 10th century.
Look, this is something, and my listeners know this, terminology is so important. When Hadrian changes the name of Judea to Syrio-Palestine, after that Bar Kokhba revolt that I just mentioned, it's the same idea, to wrench the Jews away from our patrimony. If you're not calling it Judea, if you're giving some amorphous name, and now West Bank, like the West Bank of the Jordan River, then maybe people will forget the Jews have a tie here, and that's why it is so imperative that we do that. But the foreign ministry, I've had experiences with the foreign ministry. You were there, I believe, with me years ago when we were there during the years of the terrible terrorism, and they were carting a burnt-out bus around America, a bus that had been exploded by terrorists and tens of people had been killed, and they were trying to engender some kind of sympathy for Israel in America. And he was wondering out loud at this meeting, I think of journalists that we had, why people weren't more sympathetic. And I raised my hand and I said, well, maybe because you're giving a double message. You're giving weapons. You're giving 40,000 guns to the Palestinian Authority, and then you're claiming that the Palestinian Authority or others involved with them are blowing up these buses. So people are confused, and they're figuring, if Israel is still supporting people that are doing this, Israel must have done something even worse to them, which falls exactly into their rhetoric. And of course, without explaining that, no, they're the ones who started the wars, and no, Oslo is a mistake and we shouldn't have done it, people are going to be left not understanding. And that's why I was escorted to the door at that particular foreign ministry meeting, quite proudly. But just the fact that even under this government, we don't have a full-time foreign minister, as you mentioned. Benjamin Netanyahu is the official foreign minister, which means that he's got one or two things on his plate. He's not functioning as a foreign minister. We have a deputy foreign minister who I happen to adore. I think Tzipi Chotovely is great, but she's not being allowed to be a full minister and not being allowed to do what she can do and has done in the past. And this, I just think that there's really a double message. The foreign ministry is in itself a bit, I think, confused at what the message should be. And I think it's reflected in the world that the image of Israel is not what it should be. So he's saying to you in the foreign ministry, why don't you let us who are trying to help Israel, don't attack us, attack others. But if the foreign ministry isn't doing its job correctly, I think you're well within your rights to say, hey, this is not right. You're falling into the rhetoric of the enemy.
Well, Eve, as you mentioned at the opening, we know each other for a while. I tweeted it. I Facebooked it. I attached Danny Danon, our ambassador, the foreign minister, the deputy permanent representative himself, who I'm not going to hide my criticism of him, and a few other people, because I think if there's any chance of getting the message around, fine, let that be a thing. One thing I'd like to do is say about Tzipi Chotovely, if I'm not mistaken, I saw that this week the new inductees, I forgot the term in English, tsoarim, the new corps of diplomats, the interns, well, let's call them the interns, right, were supposed to take a tour of the Temple Mount this week. Phenomenal. It's the first time that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel is taking its own people to say this is what the Temple Mount is. That's at least maybe in another 2 years at UNESCO, when it comes up, these people will know what they're talking about.
Well, that's really great news, because sometimes we think the foreign ministry is foreign to Israel. And I have to say that one of the reasons that I got so involved with Israel advocacy, and for those who don't know, Winkie was really my major mentor back in the day and saw some kind of potential, and I hope I haven't disappointed, is that b'makom she'en ish, in a place where you're feeling that the top heavy, if you want to call them, or the official people that are supposed to be doing the job aren't doing it, then you need to get involved. Maybe it's not such a bad thing for all of you listening. You can't just say somebody should do it, because either somebody isn't doing it or they're not doing it correctly. And it gives us little people an opportunity to make our voices heard and to try and have some influence. And maybe that's, the plus side of all this. I don't know. But I know that for a long time, those of us who live here have not been able to see the foreign ministry as a body that properly represented some of the issues that Israel was going through.
I also remind you, Eve, that you and I and the 2 or 3 other people participated in a meeting with a senior official in a ministry that was supposed to be head of Hasbara at that time, right? And he complained that he couldn't get anywhere. The official we met with, who shall remain nameless, that he couldn't get anywhere. Now, I understand that too many people, and I'll say the right wing, okay? It doesn't mean that
the national camp,
national camp can be a bit strident, a bit fulminating, a bit angry at times.
Present company, of course, totally excluded.
I agree with you, being on the other side of the present company. But I think that you and I and a few dozen other people have proven you can take a strong, critical, sharp stand by being nice, by being pleasant, by being correct. I think one of the things that you and I first started out with when Bibi came in, we suggested that we know a few people who can hold a glass of wine in our hands and do the small talk at cocktails. Please get us in to receptions of foreign delegations that are coming, just so that in addition to everybody else there, they can see the personal faces and hear the lives of two people who live, and we have different couples going all the time, of going over and showing them that, yes, we don't have horns, if we're talking about anti-Semitism, and we're not fanatic completely, but we have cogent positions that can be argued in a rational fashion.
So speaking already of, you mentioned 2007, so we'll switch gears here for a second. Yesterday, and I assume it's going to be for the next 2 days, today also, it's been all over the news that Israel has acknowledged that we were responsible for the bombing of the still cold but about to go online nuclear reactor in Syria. And it's been all over the place. I had to spend yesterday I was in the Tel Aviv area, so I spent more than usual number of hours of my day in the car getting around. And so I listened to the radio when I'm in the car, so I got to hear Ehud Barak and Tzipi Livni and Ehud Olmert go on and on and on about how wonderful they were and all the decisions they made. And I just... and I posted about this because I was so upset, not just at the amount of hubris that was going on there, but also, how about throw in a thank God here and there? You know, so many things could have gone wrong. Syria could have attacked us afterwards. All these kinds of things. A little bit of a, take a back seat and realize that there's a much, much bigger picture here than you. But what do you think about, do you have any ideas about why Israel came out with this news right now? All kinds of theories that are running around. And was it a good idea? Even given, some of those theories or whatever you think might be, do you think in the end it was the smart move?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't know who decided to let the information go. If it was Mr. Netanyahu, then my answer is one thing. If it was a slip as 70% of the time in government activities here in Israel happens, then I don't know exactly how to answer you. My answer would be either he is signaling that Israel, if pushed to the wall, will be determined to follow through on Menachem Begin's Iraqi bombing and on the Olmert and everybody else involved, a bombing of the, including a Mukubal, a Kabbalist, I think the Peretz took advice from, at that time in Syria.
So you're talking about that since Iran is in the news and Iran looks like they're going nuclear, so this is what Israel is sending out. Listen, we've done this before and we'll do it again?
I think yes. It could be a step just before that, Mr. Netanyahu signaling to Mr. Trump and to Mr. Putin that, listen, you guys, you only got a very short few months to do your thing before we do our thing. I think Bibi is still burned to a certain extent by the fact that he was held back at that time about, now we're talking about 5 years ago, when Meir Dagan and then some other people sort of...
At the time, the head of the Mossad, he's since deceased.
Threw their fists down on the table. I think also the Ramatkal, the army commander, also were very much against it at that time. And I think Bibi has been eating himself up that he could have we could have taken it out then, and enough years have passed that we could have overcome all the bitterness, because it took over 10 years for Menachem Begin to be cleared of almost causing World War III. When the Iraq War broke out in 1991, if I'm not mistaken. So
for those of you who don't know, Winkie is an expert in Menachem Begin. Why don't you tell them where you just retired from?
I've just officially retired from the Menachem Begin Heritage Center, where I've been working for 17 years, basically in research and information, but I still maintain a status as a research fellow.
Okay, so that's why Menachem Begin and Osirak in 1981 is going to pop to your mind, of course, in conjunction with what happened in 2007 with Ehud Olmert. But what I'm hearing is that we let out too much information. They let out information on how they uncovered it, which is possibly endangering some of the intelligence that we still have, some of the methods that Israel uses to gather intelligence. Intelligence, as everyone knows, is better kept quiet, otherwise it really loses its use. So I have heard Ehud Yaari, one of the major Israeli commentators, last night saying that he doesn't see anything good about this announcement, that the flexing muscles idea and the kind of quiet threat to Iran could have been done even while leaving this kind of up in the air. Like everyone knew Israel had done it, but Israel hadn't exactly come out and said, kind of like with Israel's nuclear program, if we have one, right? Nobody knows for sure. Nobody's come out and said so. And sometimes within that not knowing is more of an understanding than anything else. So I'm wondering if Ehud Olmert, again, the guy just got out of jail. Can't these people just go home? I mean, is there no sense of shame in certain public figures? Ehud Barak amongst them. I don't know. Sometimes I think that he's just never wrong. I think he's completely cut off from like any kind of understanding of emotion. But perhaps they're about to put out books, or they were about to come out with information on their own, and the Israeli government thought that maybe if it came out in a more organized and mivukar, restrained manner, that would be the better way of doing it. Is that possible? It's hard for me to believe that somebody just slipped here, because the Minister of Defense, Victor Lieberman, said yesterday that he wishes the information hadn't come out, which kind of made it sound like there was a decision taken. I don't know.
Well, let's remind ourselves, Netanyahu was not part of the decision.
Really?
No, I'm talking about in 2007.
Ah, okay, yes. Although he claims today that he knew all about it.
Whether he knew about it because someone else knew about it, that's a given. The same way that Shimon Peres knew about the Begin's bombing of Iraq and told him not to do it. But so that I think we can check out or put on the side self-glorification on the matter of Mr. Netanyahu, taking credit for something he didn't do. Mm-hmm. Of course, on the other hand, he keeps saying, listen, if these bums did it, then I can do it. In other words, you guys took the decision. You walked it up to nuclear war. You walked it up to regular war. You walked it up to severe criticism from the world for going after a nuclear placement. I can do it. I'm more right-wing than Ehud Olmert and put all those guys put together. So that's another factor you have to consider.
Well, there's like an ego duel with the nation's future hanging in the balance. What a horrible thought.
I don't think it's an ego duel. Let's take my supposition as correct. It's not, but supposition that it's getting more dangerous, and Mr. Netanyahu is trying to send signals, help me. And one of the ways of saying it is saying, hey, we did it before, we'll do it again. Okay? In this sense, he's not playing his ego. He's saying, listen, they did it. Believe me, I can do it. Not that he's going to do it or wants to do it or what, I don't know. But in other words, in terms of the diplomatic pre-planning, he's saying, listen, let's push it off. Because remember, with Begin, there was none of this. It was a complete bolt out of heaven that he did it. He didn't prepare anything. And you and I happen to know someone, Mr. Shmuel, the late Shmuel Katz, who was very bitter about that because he told Begin, you should have given me a month and I would have dripped things into the press, at least to get them primed, that if that happened, listen, we pointed it out to you 3 weeks ago, but you didn't take the hint. So maybe now this is the big hint.
Begin was a different kind of person anyhow, when it came to the kind of human being that he was and the lack of glory that he wanted for himself. He was really, maybe aside from Shamir, maybe the last really prime minister who was like that, who you really felt went into public service to serve the public and not necessarily anything else at all. So all right, so I just, I think like just certain things shouldn't be talked about. And we have Hezbollah, and we have Iran, and we have the sanctions that aren't off, and Iran is going nuclear without making any games about it also. And Syria at least tried to hide what they were doing. They made it look like some agricultural farm. And according to the news yesterday, one of the reasons that Israel even noticed the place is because North Koreans were working there, so they knew that it was a copy of a North Korean nuclear reactor.
Thank you for bringing in North Korea. I was trying to figure out how to bring that in. People say, whether we're talking about anti-Semites or other people, why should Israel get the United States into trouble? Hello, North Korea maybe is a connection, a crossing of the lines in which both America and Israel are on the center of that X. Mm-hmm. we've been saying in Israel, we may be first, you're the second.
Well, I think that's with any of our enemies. If anybody thinks Iran is just out to take Israel off the map and then isn't going after Europe or the United States, if anyone thinks that this global jihad is going to start with the Jews, then they're not paying attention to what's happening to the Christians and the Yazidis and every other ethnic group around the world that isn't a particular type of Muslim, let alone Muslim itself. So I think, and one of the things that's really bothering me, and I just came back from, 2 weeks intensive work in the States, is that the people aren't paying attention. How can we not be paying attention, everybody? You can't say anymore that the news isn't out there. It's not like in the olden days where you really had to make an effort to find out what was going on the other side of the world. All you have to do now is push a button or turn a knob at any point in the day, and you see what's happening. You can choose to ignore it, but now the onus is on all of us if we don't take action. And here with Iran and with North Korea and with Hezbollah and some of the really horrible people in the world, they're being completely honest, Hamas. They're being completely honest about what it is that they hope to accomplish. They're not playing games. They're not pretending. They're not covering up. And in a way, it's worse because now they can laugh at us too and say, it's not like you didn't know. So, where do we go with all this? We're here in the spring. Pesach is coming up. Passover is coming up. It's the season of renewal. There's little birds. You can exactly, right on cue. Boy, those birds are amazing. The birds are chirping. I'm thinking I maybe should have taken an allergy pill this morning because everything is blossoming here. It's absolutely magnificent in the land. Just magnificent. I'm not saying this to the people on the East Coast who are in, once again, a snowstorm, but it's amazing. You feel the renewal, Passover, springtime, really our new year, the new beginnings. And here we have this looming thing over us and a sense of, has the world gone mad? That political correctness is calling for not saying what it is, not calling anti-Semitism what it is. I have a son in Poland right now, leading a group there as part of his post-army work that he's doing. And they're not supposed to be saying, of course he's not listening, not supposed to be saying that the Poles had anything to do with the Holocaust. They were the victims of the Second World War. Has everybody lost their minds?
Well, this has been going on for about 25 years now in terms of dumbing down the messaging, dealing with the idea you can't hurt someone, whether calling him something that he or she is or describing his or her association with something else. And I understand now, I'm not in the States, you've been there more than I have, in terms of safe spaces in universities, or now whites can't come into black caucuses, and all sorts of other things that are complete inversion of what they're fighting against, theoretically speaking, in terms of what is their liberalism? It's shutting down people to talk. What is their liberalism? Ostracizing people. What is their liberalism? Progressivism, whatever they're calling it, is targeting people who have a much better claim, in our case, to the land than any other group of people here. And if there was no violence, the Arabs would be living here. And I think if there ever was, God forbid, a Palestinian state, none of them would move there because they'd rather stay in Israel for economic and other type of opportunities that are afforded them. So it's all a fake. It's all a put on.
It's all fake. It's all fake news to some degree.
No, but it's worse. You go to your people and they just turn you off when you say something that's inconvenient. And when I was growing up, we argued. We argued in the Zionist youth movements. We argued on campuses. Now it's like a blending. You're going to be making some sort of nice Pesach food for the Seder. The mixer will go around. That's what's happening. Now, it's okay to mix up, but the uniqueness of each and every individual should not be lost. And that's, I think, one of the messages of Passover. We walked out of Egypt. How many other people were able to save themselves from slavery, from oppression, and then start up anew? We did that twice in the land of Israel, and then after the Holocaust, jump forward, we did it again. We're not saving that for ourselves. We're the example. Follow us. Don't hate us. Don't put us down, and don't make false claims about what we're doing to some other people or some other thing. If that's a Pesach message that I can leave the audience with, the devoted listeners of Eve Harrow, I'll try to do that.
Well, along the lines of let my people go. So you were also very involved with the movement to free Soviet Jewry. Nathan Sharansky is going to be awarded one of the Israel Prizes. Education Minister Naftali Bennett gave him that award for special things he's done for diaspora. Long time coming, huh?
Long time coming, which gives me an opportunity, if I have a few minutes. I met him in November 1976. He had, we were supposed to meet beforehand, but he got arrested. You know, it happens sometimes to Soviet Jewry activists in the former Soviet Union. But we met the day before we had to leave. And as you know, Eve, he's quite short, and I'm a little bit taller. So it was a bent-over conversation on my half. He was glowing. I said, Natan, you just came out of 2 weeks in jail. He said, yes. And I said, Natan, your voice is hoarse. He said, yes. I said, what is your joy? He says, 8 hours a day I was able to lecture nonstop on Jewish history, Zionism, literature to the entire prison. Everybody wanted to come, and they didn't interfere because we were inside jail. They couldn't do anything worse about it.
Well, talk about seeing the cup half full all the time. Where was this conversation that you had with him?
In the Moscow apartment of Alexander Lerner in that November 1976. And to my chagrin, of course, the following March, he went in for, what, 13 years? Yeah,
long time. You need to write a book, by the way. And then I get the first interview when you do. Because you really, I think, the last 45 years of a very exciting Jewish time, not just in Israel, but also out of Israel, even before you made Aliyah. You've been involved with so many of the different movements. And I'm sure you've got a lot of these conversations, a lot of these memories that would be interesting to share.
The title is going to be called Getting Involved.
Sounds good. So one more topic before I let you go, getting involved. So as you know, I'm crazy about archaeology, as are you. You live in Shilo, which is the site of our first capital when we come into the land with Joshua. It's where the tabernacle is during the period of the Judges before Jerusalem becomes our eternal capital and the temple is built.
Despite UNESCO.
Despite UNESCO, those of us here know the truth. But there are constantly digs going on in Shilo. The last time I counted, there were at least 3 archaeologists working there and a bunch more, and they do things in the summer and people can get involved. But they are digging all the time. I know that they're also digging outside of Shilo where the new community of Amichai is going up. The people who were thrown out of Amona are getting a new town. I'm going to be there on Passover with a bus for One Israel Fund. We're going to be seeing what's happening with Amichai because we've also donated a park there. But in Shilo itself, just before we went on the air, you showed me a picture of like the newest discovery. Can we talk about it?
We could mention it. I don't know exactly where. I'm thinking right near the Visitors Center for those who have been with Eve at Shilo before.
Or even without me. If you've been to Shilo, you know what we're talking about.
I'm trying to give a... for those who do not know, Byzantine basilicas, churches, were always directed east with an apse, A-P-S-E, which was a semicircle where the altar was kept, and it was usually either fenced off or bordered away from the church. And it was in fact, sometimes you had to walk up 1 or 2 steps in order to get there. That's where the altar at that time period. And it's very easy to identify if you dig. And I understand now they discovered, if I'm not mistaken, the 4th basilica at Shilo. Wow. Now that, as Eve, I hope, will tell you and confirm, that's an amazing number of basilicas outside of Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. I don't think you have that almost anywhere else in the Galil or other places where Christianity grew following 333 when Constantine became
324. I think Constantine converts to Christianity, and the east, at least the eastern part of the Roman Empire, becomes the Byzantine Empire, which is essentially a Christian empire.
Right, instead of being
that becomes the official religion of the empire.
So we're excited to see yet again, because that, first of all, that confirms Shilo. They're not going to build that many churches, basilicas in one place if they're not convinced that Shilo was in that area.
Well, what's the importance of Shilo to Christians?
If I'm not mistaken, Jesus is compared to a temple. His body, outstretched arms and stuff like that, is compared to the body, to the tabernacle. And in fact, I took an evangelical there who spent 45 minutes explaining to his followers all this in great intricacy.
I think also because of the verse in the Torah referring to Judah, to the 4th son, who becomes, of course, the monarch, that the scepter will not leave Judah, the monarchy will not leave Judah until Shilo comes, which is interpreted also by us to mean the Messiah. Of course, difference of opinion is who Messiah is, but that's the intent of the verse. So I think that the site of Shilo is also then very important for Christians for that reason.
That's correct. So that's one. We know in the area of Amichai, they're finding Iron Age 1 remains and artifacts. Details I've asked. I have not yet exactly whether it's jugs, whether it's a building, whether it's pottery. Pottery is jugs, or implements and stuff like that nature. I will find out eventually.
And that means Iron Age 1 is Joshua. So that means, again, and we come in on Passover, so it's the 3,000th and something anniversary, 3,300 years or so anniversary since we come in. So, and again, of course, Joshua at Shilo, he's the one who sets up the tabernacle at Shilo, and that's also where they divide the land into the different inheritance portions of the tribe. So Shilo, hugely important when we first come into the land.
And the last part is that last year we had a group of about 60 altogether archaeologists and volunteers from a consortium of Christian colleges and universities, basically in the South, who have opened up a new, they opened up a newish excavation just under the tower on the way out to the northern plateau, where they're trying to map out completely the complete circumference of the Canaanite wall that surrounded Shilo at that time. So that'll be the fourth excavation. Which
would have been the wall that Abraham would have seen as he's walking down from Shechem, down along the way of the patriarchs on the hill road, the hill highway, down towards Hebron and Beersheba and the area south of Jerusalem, where he ends up making his home.
And to come back full circle, we opened up with national identity and theft of national identity and UNESCO and the wrong names. Digging at Shilo, among other places in the land of Israel, confirms the Bible as not only a book of spirituality, religiosity, if I can use that word, observance, or anything else you want to call it, and history. It details exactly what happened, as far as we can tell by the digs over the past 150 years, in all sorts of places around the land of Israel, in Lachish, in Megiddo, in Chatzor, Yericho, Jerusalem, and at Shilo, that it all seems to fit together. Now, you might be accused of pushing things in a certain way, but after 5 years, either it's true or not. That's the good thing about archaeology. Read about it, in another couple of years, keep digging. I'm from New York, Eve, so dig we must is one of the slogans of those from New York. And you will find out that the good book is a very good book.
It's a very, very, very good book. And I just want to end on a note that you mentioned. When we talk about the archaeology, a couple of things. One is, in this Jewish country, we are as delighted to find a Byzantine basilica church as we are to find an ancient synagogue.
And preserve it for eternity.
Exactly. This is real freedom of religion and respect for every other civilization and every other culture. And I also want to end with a word of condolence, and I seem to have to do this on every show, for someone who was himself like an amateur archaeologist, Adiel, was that his first name? Coleman, from Kochav HaShachar, who worked at the dig in the city of David, was murdered by a terrorist in the old city on his way home from work a few days ago, left a wife and 4 children. My nephew who lives in Kochav HaShachar was friends with him. They're in absolute shock. A man who was just delighted to do the hard work in order to uncover the history of Jerusalem for everybody involved. So first of all, may he rest in peace, and may his be really the last, may he be the last victim of terror in this ongoing religious war that we have here. The religious war for God, for whatever religion you are a part of, the religious war for God, for justice, for truth. And the Jewish people, as always, seem to be at the forefront of that fight. But if you're not on our side, then you're on the other side. And I want to thank you so much, Medad, for joining me today. I always love talking to you, Wink.
Thank you very much for having me on and recording my voice.
Okay, so I will be putting out a show, I hope, on Pesach. But until then, have a wonderful week, everybody, and a happy Passover. And may we just have good times now, and may God make his presence maybe a little more felt. I mean, it's there all the time, but we need him now more than ever, but we still need to roll up our sleeves. So take care, everybody. Have a great week. Thanks to Tabitha and to Ben and to everybody at the station. You can always write to me, by the way, eve@thelandofisrael.com. Love hearing from you. Take care, everybody. Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation. Goodbye for now.